All right, and we are live, and we are very loud. Okay, let me fix this real quick. Oh, goodness. Let me see if that helps. Okay. I don't know if it was out for y'all, but it was out for me. But what's up, bros and besties? Welcome to another episode of Bitches Love Sports. Starting at a little bit of a different time on Tuesday, but I'm sure by now y'all have noticed Tuesdays have been a little bit weird. So, not back at the studio yet, for actually completely different reasons. But I wanted to make sure and hit y'all up today and give us an opportunity to talk about just some of the developments that came out of the Roger Goodell press conference, how it connects to some of the stuff that we talked about on Friday, and then some of the stuff that Gianni Infantino talked about when it comes to the World Cup. So, thanks for joining me tonight. And this might not be a very long stream. Give me one second. My phone loves to close apps. But while I'm pulling this up, we can talk about some of the shout outs and call outs that I have tonight, which I don't have many. Um, One, I'm shouting out the Cowboys again because they have just been so, I don't know what's the word. I don't know if I want to say like efficient. Like I know we don't like to talk about the Cowboys potentially moving different. Um, but I'll just say this. I really do appreciate the fact that we are several weeks into the offseason. We're on a full-on coaching stuff trying to find a whole staff for Christian Parker. And we still haven't heard any drama from the Cowboys. No drama, no mess, nothing like that. So shout out to them. And on that note, shout out to Dak Prescott. He's at the Pro Bowl. He was asked about keeping George Pickens and what that would mean to him. And I love the fact that he was so matter of fact about it. Just like, yes, he's a difference maker. We want to keep him. I need to keep him, and I'll get involved in the process if I have to. So shout out to him. And then there's some other shout outs and call outs that I had in mind. Like I kind of wanted to talk about the Jason Kidd situation, but we can table that for now until there's more Mavericks news to discuss. What's up, Royal? Good to see you. Yes, you are the first one here. Always, always. You were like setting a record. Um, I wonder if anybody's gonna come for your crown at some point. But Royal is always the first one here, and I'm glad to see you. Now, Royal, I just want you to know I love you to death. But there will be some politics discussed today, largely because of the questions that Roger Goodell was asked about just the security at the Super Bowl. And I know that's not your favorite topic, but if you are so inspired to ask a question, feel free. I just want to give you a heads up that we will be talking about that because Roger Goodell had a press conference yesterday. So, for those who are less familiar, the Super Bowl is not just a game. It's not just a day. It is a whole week of events designed for media and fans to just celebrate the game, but also get to talk to people, ask questions, get questions answered, so on and so forth. And so to kick off Super Bowl week, Roger Goodell had a press conference yesterday, and he started off with a nice, quiet conversation with Maria Taylor. And then when they opened up the floor for questions from the media, that's when some of the topics got a little bit more interesting. So he was asked about several things, and I'm gonna discuss like the three main topics that I felt like were the most relevant, the most interesting, especially when it comes to the things that I typically cover on this podcast. And so I'm broadcasting to both YouTube and Facebook tonight. So if you are watching on Facebook by any chance, it might be a good idea to come over to YouTube just to make sure I can see your comments. Because sometimes in StreamYard, I don't see all the comments. That could be my fault. It could be a setting, but just letting you know. But anyway, let's hop into it. So he had this press conference and he fielded questions from the media. And speaking of media in attendance, I gotta give a quick shout out to the homie K. Lou. So K. Lou has been on my show before. K. Lou of Dope Content Entertainment. And so some of y'all might know him if you watch regularly, but he's actually at the Super Bowl right now. He is a credentialed videographer and media professional for this year's Super Bowl. And I just think that is so dope. And so it's his first time going. And so from, what I've discussed with him via like one text message, because dude is busy, he's adjusting to the schedule and everything like that. So I don't know when he plans on going live or what content he's putting out or what he's gotten clearance to put out. But if you're not following him and you're an NFL fan and you want to get some more exclusive NFL content, definitely give him a follow just to see what he posts. But I love that for him. I love that for him. So if you're an NFL fan and you're somehow following me but not following him yet, check out his content. All right, so three major topics. There were a lot of topics discussed, but three major topics from Roger Goodell's press conference. He talked about security and the potential ICE presence at the Super Bowl. He talked about the Rooney Rule. I'm deciding what figures. I'm like security. I started with this one and then I went to this one. So he started with security and ICE presence at the Super Bowl. He talked about the Rooney Rule and minority coaching hires, and he also talked about globalization of the game. So I'm gonna get into all that with you. But I see Albert is in the chat, and I want to say what's up to Albert. He said that's a perfect way to put it. Super Bowl week is a week of activities. Yeah, 100%. And I hope to be there one day. Fingers crossed. Y'all help me manifest that. But anyway, let's start off with the ice of it all and let's get that out the way, because I feel like it's worth talking about, but also, and for reasons I'll explain in a second, it's been made a bigger issue than it technically needs to be. Hello, thanks for the compliment, Albert. Appreciate it. So the ice of it all. So basically what's happened is since Bad Bunny was announced as the halftime performer for this year's Super Bowl, there have been discussions about ICE having a presence at the Super Bowl, mainly because top officials and leadership of ICE came out and was like, we're going to be at the Super Bowl. And they actually made a big deal about being at the Super Bowl, I guess, to intimidate Bad Bunny fans, under the impression, I suppose, that there are undocumented immigrants who are going to be at the Super Bowl, because, undocumented immigrants, they be having the plug on them Super Bowl tickets. Whatever. I don't know. I can't explain it, but that is what started all this. It was Bad Bunny being announced, and then not rumors from fans, not a bunch of political grandstanding by people who just wanted to stir up shit on social media. This was people who work for the government who was like, yes, we're going to be there. So Roger Goodell was asked about that, because that would be a little bit different from how Super Bowl security has been handled in the past, at least based on people's image of what they're thinking of when it comes to Super Bowl security, as contrasted by what they think of when they think of ICE. That's an important distinction. I want you to remember that, because we're going to come back to that in a second. So Roger Goodell did not say yes or no when he was asked about ICE being at the Super Bowl, but he did acknowledge that this is a SEAR 1 level event, which we already knew that. Anybody who knows anything about the Super Bowl already knew that. But in case you're not familiar with what that means, SEAR is a numerical rating developed by the Department of Homeland Security, and they rank over 90,000 events every year, and they assign them a number based on a number between 1 and 5 based on significance, attendance, risk assessment, significance, attendance, risk assessment, infrastructure, and visibility. Okay. And this is a quote from the DHS website. They said SEAR 1 includes events of significant national and or international importance and may require extensive federal interagency support. So examples of this are the Super Bowl, or major marathons like the Boston Marathon, or games like the Rose Bowl. And then, of course, there's the upcoming FIFA World Cup. These are all SEAR 1 level events. So what I want to do is get specific about what this means, so that you, one, understand some of the things that might come from the government as well as from the NFL, and also so you can better understand my stance on some things that I might say between now and the Super Bowl, or now and the World Cup. Because one thing that I appreciate about y'all as my audience, one thing I really appreciate, y'all, is that y'all actually want to be informed. Y'all actually like getting accurate information and not just responding to dramatic headlines and sensationalist video titles, right? So here's the information that I think you need to know in order to discuss this from an intelligent perspective, from an informed perspective, okay? So when they talk about SEAR 1 level events and federal interagency support, that does not have to include ICE agents, okay? So what this could include is, one, the TSA. So we're not talking about the people who, check you in at the airport. We're talking about the cool part of the TSA, the one with the Viper teams, right? It could also include Customs and Border Protection. So that's for marine surveillance and perimeter security. And then there's the Secret Service. So the Secret Service, their role in it all is tech on tech on tech. So they got the cameras, they got the sensors, cybersecurity, signal jamming. They're the ones who do the room sweeps, and they have the canine teams and the technology that can detect explosives. And then there's so they're basically the on-site physical and cyber shield of the event, right? And then there's the technical specialists who kind of complement what the Secret Service does. So that's additional cybersecurity, explosive detection, drone mitigation, because that's a big thing, so on and so forth. And so a few things I need y'all to understand about this and what it means is that the concerns about ICE technically involve concerns about two different aspects of homeland security. So there's ICE, which stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And then there's the less talked about department, which actually should technically be more talked about, which is the ERO. So ERO stands for Enforcement and Removal Operations. So technically, the ERO is the branch that's supposed to handle civil immigration enforcement and deportation. And so, because of how things are represented in the media and because of like the wording in the big, beautiful bill and so on and so forth, the terms have gotten a little bit conflated. And people have just started using ICE to refer to people who are actually doing the deportation and removal. Does that make sense? So, this distinction is important because of this. ICE has actually been present at every Super Bowl for the past 20 years. Okay. They've been there. ICE was created in 2003 by George W. Bush. And before that, the closest thing to ICE in existence in America was the Immigration and Naturalization Service that was started in 1993. So when it comes to ICE and their typical role at the Super Bowl, as part of customs enforcement, one of the things that they do is they seize counterfeit merchandise because that's related to customs. So they seize like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in counterfeit merchandise and tickets related to the Super Bowl. And then they also address human trafficking concerns. Quiet as it's kept, human trafficking tends to increase in activity around major sporting events. And so that is another area that ICE typically does address for events like the Super Bowl, SEAR 1 level events like the Super Bowl. And then if there's a specific terrorist threat, they might be involved in that too. So ICE has been involved in every Super Bowl for the past 20 years. The ERO, however, has not been involved in Super Bowl security except in 2017, coincidentally, the last time that Trump was in office. And they didn't play a specific role, though. They were there, supposedly also for public safety, but it was just that one time. So I'm guessing that there was something about that involvement that made the NFL say, like, nah, let's not do that again. So when it comes to ICE, typically civil immigration enforcement does not happen at the Super Bowl. And as of today, they're actually saying that the concern is general public safety. And so the NFL has put out statements saying that they don't plan for there to be any immigration enforcement operations at the Super Bowl. But then there's a question that some people have of like, okay, but what gets classified as public safety? Because we've already seen how this administration and other leadership, they can determine how they want to define certain words or what they want to include under certain umbrellas based on what their initiative is, like what their goal is. And so people are asking what can be defined or what can be classified as public safety and who might be stationed where because of that definition and how it's interpreted. And so in general, obviously, what people are trying to avoid is when they're talking about avoiding ICE at the Super Bowl, is they're talking about the image of like the mass thugs with federal authority to execute people on site, apparently with no due process. I'm just saying that's what we've observed is happening. There doesn't seem to be any consequences for this shit, so that's what people have observed, and they don't like it. They don't like the fact that these people are running around without warrants, intimidating the public, especially at events like the Super Bowl when they should be having a good time and celebrating the game. Nobody wants that shit. And so that's what they're trying to avoid. That's what people are trying to get assurance that won't happen. So are they using the like maybe the wrong term when they refer to ICE technically? But we know what they're talking about. So yes, there will be federal officers at the Super Bowl. That is normal. There will be ICE at the Super Bowl in some regard. That is also normal. But this branch of it that's like throwing people in the back of vans, it's running around in masks and tactical gear. They're not expecting those people to show up. And I'm really glad about it. And I actually, in addition to everything that we've discussed in terms of human rights and whatnot, I actually have a kind of shallow reason for being glad. Like, ice is tacky as fuck. Like, can we just be real about that for a second? And like I said, I know this is a shallow reason, but I'm just starting with the base level reasons. Ice is tacky as fuck. There's a lot of eyes on America right now, and people are watching America and how they handle this event. Folks are already talking about a boycott of the FIFA World Cup. They're talking about boycotting the Olympics, and everything else because of how these untrained motherfuckers are out here acting. So keep them away. Like when people think about high end events in America and like high end security, they're usually thinking about like the guys in suits with the earpieces and the shades. Like yeah, they're serious about the security, but they're classy with it and they're not so trigger happy, so that's what people want to see when it comes to security: men in suits and shiny shoes and shades, and advanced technology, people with experience, high levels of experience and training, right? So I feel like when it comes to public safety, those are some of the most important things to consider. Um, and speaking of the boycotts, I want to mention this quote from the players coalition because it's relevant to the Super Bowl, and I think it'll be relevant to things that may happen during the World Cup. So, the Players Coalition is an organization that works with athletes, owners, and coaches to build racial equity and social justice. And so, this was a statement from Malcolm Jenkins and Aquan Bolden on behalf of the Players Coalition. So, this is what they said regarding security at the Super Bowl. They said, "We hope they will reconsider." This is talking about ICE. So, like I said, ICE is usually involved anyway, but we know what they're talking about. So we said, we hope they will reconsider. As former NFL players and Super Bowl champions, we cannot be quiet as the federal administration uses the pinnacle of our craft to be a Trojan horse for ICE to run rampant in the Bay Area. The player said, "We don't need ICE at the Super Bowl. The Bay Area is a safe and proud community that is stronger because of all their valued immigrant residents. Bringing in ICE will simply make people afraid and for no good reason." On the making people afraid part, like I definitely feel them on that. There's no reason for that level of intimidation and that type of a negative presence. You feel what I'm saying? And so, but the part that stuck out to me was the Trojan horse scenario that they mentioned in that statement, because that scenario, if it were to happen, I promise it would have an extremely detrimental impact on the upcoming World Cup, the upcoming Olympics, future Super Bowls. Like that's not a precedent that you want to set, that this is what America does. That they'll put on this great event for the world to attend and then use it to basically terrorize people and violate human rights. You know what I'm saying? That's the last thing that we need. So um this is basically what those players are trying to avoid, and this is what people speaking out against it are also trying to avoid. So like yes, it's about the Super Bowl, but it's also about the image of America and it's about upcoming events. I'm trying to see if I have any more notes on this, but yeah, let me see if y'all have any questions in the chat. Albert said, "My understanding of the Super Bowl, at least in the past, is you don't have just local police involved, but military as well." Yeah, so not necessarily military per se, all the time, but they do have like militaristic operations and tactical operations, if that makes sense. So there are certain operations that are classified as like, I think I mentioned earlier, like marine level security and stuff like that. So it's not like where actual Marines or actual military are called, but there are federal officers, there are federal agents, there are federal agencies involved in the process. And one of the things that's interesting about this that I was reading is, there are aspects, or certain branches under Homeland Security that have actually been trying to distance themselves from ICE and from the ERO. And this didn't just happen this year. This isn't new. Like some of these discussions have been going on under the Department of Homeland Security since like 2018, right? And basically, what it is that them having like the ICE logo on some of their documents, or them being classified as technically part of ICE, has actually had a negative impact on some of the investigations that they're trying to conduct, because these are people who are trying to conduct investigations, and then when someone that they need to question or someone they need as a witness sees that they're connected to ICE, then they'll shut down. And so it's like causing people to not want to cooperate, not want to help, and not be helpful. And they're like, yo, we can't even do our jobs because of how polarizing this aspect of the Department of Homeland Security is. So it's interesting, but main takeaways is ICE has always been at the Super Bowl. So you might hear about ICE being at the Super Bowl, but they should be there in their typical capacity, not terrorizing attendees. Cool, cool. All right. So something else that was discussed during Roger Goodell's press conference is the Rooney Rule and black head coaches. So, in case you hadn't heard, there were 10 head coaching spots available in the NFL this hiring cycle, and there were no black head coaches hired for any of them. So, there's been a lot of discussion about the Rooney Rule as well as their accelerator program. And here are my takes on it, basically, because like the facts are the facts. No black head coaches were hired this past hiring cycle, and if y'all been watching me for a while, you know my stance on the Rooney Rule. Like, okay, props to the NFL for trying to make a difference or trying to find some way to bring equity to the hiring process, but I don't think the Rooney Rule is an effective way to do it. Um, so how this came up was someone asked if the lack of hires of black head coaches this year was connected to the fact that the accelerator program did not happen. So the last time we talked about the accelerator program on this podcast was when I was talking about Christian Parker, the new defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and how he was in the accelerator program because he was actually highlighted by the NFL and people who are in charge of that program as someone who has the potential to be a head coach in the future. Um, and so the accelerator program is basically it's a league initiative to increase diversity in head coach and front office positions in the NFL. And so this is to help both women and minorities. And so it didn't happen this past year. And the NFL, their official statement was that they paused the program in order to reimagine it. But for most people, the fact didn't escape us that this pause just happened to occur right after the current administration took a hard stance against DEI and at a time when the NFL was hoping to eventually receive federal regulatory approval for the NFL media's deal with ESPN. So that's a deal that like we didn't hear about it till August, but that deal between NFL media, and ESPN, and then technically Disney was involved. That deal had been in the works for like 5 years. So they weren't trying to fuck it up at the last second, knowing that they were going to announce it in August by doing something to piss off the administration, which seems relatively easy to do compared to past administrations. And then, by the way, there's also the fact that they have more changes planned when it comes to equity about 8 years from now, right? So there's a lot of stuff they're going to need approval for. They're trying to stay on the right side of the right people. But let's not get distracted. We're talking about the Rooney Rule and this program. So that program, the accelerator program, I agree. It does need to be reimagined, just like the Rooney Rule needs to. Like, I don't know if there's a purpose for a rule like the Rooney Rule at all, if I'm being honest. Like, Roger Goodell seemed really excited about it. Of course, he's going to sound excited about it. But because of the way that it's implemented, I mean, that was one of the things that led to Brian Flores' lawsuit against the NFL. It was the fact that he found out before his interview happened that the whole interview was a sham and that the team he was interviewing with had already decided who they were going with. And then someone, Bill Belichick, accidentally texted him congratulations, not realizing it was a different Brian that was actually getting the job. And that's what set that whole thing off. But I'm just kind of like, okay, once again, I appreciate the sentiment, but it's like, what is this actually doing to resolve the problem? And I'm going to tell you what the problem is in a second from my perspective. My perspective. Um, so yeah, the program needs to be reimagined. One, there's the logistics of it. The timing of it being in May often caused it to overlap with OTAs. And so that made participation complicated. So like coordinators who wanted to participate in the program, they had to be away from their team during OTAs. And then if they wanted people who are already head coaches to participate in the program in whatever regard, whatever aspect, it was bad timing for them as well. So just even from a logistical standpoint, before we get into any of the values and beliefs surrounding the existence of the program, just the timing is bad. And then also apparently they want to shift the focus on the business side of football, as well as getting all 32 teams involved. So that's going to take planning. And these are all great things that I do think should be implemented in the program. But put a pin in that while we talk about the Rooney Rule, and we're going to come back to this. So Actually, I don't even think I have anything to add about the Rooney Rule. But yeah, I don't blame the NFL for revisiting the Rooney Rule or for revisiting the accelerated program, regardless of what their true motives were, whether it was to appease the federal government or because they really wanted to reimagine it. Hell, it might be both. But I'm just like, okay, cool, reimagine the program, do that. Um, but here's the thing that, in my opinion, no program, no initiative, no rule can properly address. It's this fact right here, is that a lot of the decisions that are being made when it comes to these head coaches are not being made based solely on resumes. So I've seen a few different articles talking about the fact that some of the black head coaches that weren't hired had better resumes than some of the people who did actually get hired as head coaches. And so, but when we actually look at what's coming from these teams in terms of communication, when they're talking about why they hired who they hired and why they're excited about this person, we're hearing terms like alignment. We're hearing things like, oh, this person is a CEO type. But then you have to ask yourself, what does a CEO type look like? That's going to look different depending on who is making that assessment of a person. And that can be different based on the cultural norms, the societal norms that you're used to. So if that's what teams are looking for, then preconceived notions about what that means will definitely play a role. You can't make a rule that gets that out of the hiring process. You can't make an initiative that gets that out of the hiring process. These are still human beings who are making these decisions, you know? It's not like the NFL ranks the candidates and then assigns them to teams. It's like, no, people are choosing. And they're choosing based on these qualities. And they're also choosing based on interpersonal chemistry. Basically, because owners, GMs, and head coaches work closely together. So owners and GMs, they're going to want to pick people that they're comfortable with, that they could see themselves talking to every day. And so, yes, there's an interpersonal component where they might feel more comfortable with someone who looks like them, who has a similar cultural background, you know? So, those are the things that, if Goodell is being honest and wanting to solve this issue, and we're going to talk about that word solve in a second too, you how are you going to find a way to address that? If you can resolve that, you can literally solve racism in America, because that's basically what you're doing. You would have to figure out how to get people to not be prejudiced or biased ever to resolve that. You know what I'm saying? So if the NFL is that powerful, more power to them. I know they have like a lot of different research programs for different aspects of the game, but that shit would be something else. So going back to the program and the Rooney Rule, maybe the new revamped accelerator program, maybe it can actually help candidates navigate this type of evaluation and how they present their skills and their ideas so they can be respected and valued. And then maybe when they increase the involvement of all 30 teams as described, it can encourage more interaction between the decision makers and future head coaching candidates so that they can learn a better appreciation for people who don't look, talk, or dress like them, or who come from a different background, or who might intimidate them. We should probably spend more time on that part, actually. Actually, no. There's that's a lot of speculation. I'll come back to that idea when it's relevant. But no, for real, like you and I, you watching and me, we are regular people. Like when we apply for jobs, we do have to consider how we dress, how we talk, how our potential employer might perceive us. So while some people might not like this aspect of the hiring process, it's actually an aspect of every hiring process, to where you, like, even me as a black woman, especially when I was younger, I had to know that, like, hey, there might be some people on that hiring committee who have been taught the negative stereotypes about Black women, especially quote unquote angry Black women. And I just kind of had to take that into account. Hopefully, it didn't come into play. Like, great when it didn't. But I just had to know, like, I didn't want to be so naive that I thought that, oh, there's no way they would, they would know about this stereotype or believe this stereotype, or even have had an experience in their life that would reinforce this stereotype. All these are things that people have to think about. So the number of black head coaches in the NFL is always going to go up and down. So that's why it's like, is it disappointing, especially considering the quality of black candidates in this hiring cycle and how many spots were available? Yeah, but I'm like, I'm really not tripping, because we're talking about a job where there are literally only 32 of these positions in the entire world. So as frustrating as it might be for some people, it like the makeup of black head coaches in the NFL, it just simply will not always be in direct proportion to the racial makeup of the country or the racial makeup of the league. Um, but I do like that the league plans to emphasize the business part of the NFL in its accelerated program in the future, because one, I honestly believe that that needs to be demystified for anyone who wants to move up in the NFL, whether it's on the coaching side or on the business side. There's a lot of people who don't have a quality understanding of how the NFL actually works, and that alone might be impacting their ability to get a head coaching position or get a front office position, you know? It's like they might go in their interview and just say some shit that don't make sense, and then the general manager's like, "No, that person they need more time." But what they need is actually more information, not necessarily more time sometimes. And so there are some people who, like, if you don't have the family ties or the professional connections to teach you the ins and outs, like where you gonna learn that? Like through osmosis, you know? And so I think focusing on diversity throughout the structure of the league, especially the positions that impact CBA negotiations, policies, bylaws, and media content, I think ultimately that will have a way better impact on the league than simply tracking black head coaches specifically every year. So I don't know if y'all feel me on that, but let me take a look at the chat and see what y'all are talking about. Um, let's see. What's up, JV? Good to see you in the chat. Da-da-da-da-da. JV said, I was saying that the Cowboys have found their continuity for the defense. Da-da-da. Okay. Are you talking about the recent coaching hires? I saw that there was some news that came out about their coaching process today, but like I haven't really like dug into it. Um, JV said, you're still younger, Des. You haven't even reached 30. Very sweet of you to say. Okay. So on that note, let's continue. So that brings us to the globalization of the sport. This is a really exciting part, because I love when I think things are going to go one way, and then somebody in the NFL says something, and I'm like, oh, things actually might go a different way. So did y'all hear that the Cowboys are going to play their first international game in 11 years in 2026? Okay, so you probably didn't hear that because nobody actually said that. But here's why I think it's gonna happen. So follow me here. The stadium in Mexico City should be the renovations on it should be complete by the World Cup, which happens this summer. And so Roger Goodell, one of the things he said in this press conference yesterday was that the NFL will have an international game in Mexico City in December. And so there are a few reasons why I honestly believe the Cowboys are likely to host this game. So, number one, the league mandates that each team hosts an international game at least once every 8 years. Now, it's been 11 years for the Cowboys because this mandate was just introduced in 2022. But Roger Goodell has actually been very vocal about his desire for every NFL team to participate in the international series. And so once we combine that with point number two, we can see why that's actually supported. So, point number two that I have on this is the Dallas Cowboys only have international marketing rights in Mexico. So, you would think that a team that's as popular as the Cowboys and with such a high valuation would have multiple international markets because a lot of teams do. But they only have rights in Mexico. And this is something, by the way, that teams apply for. Like the NFL doesn't assign the global marketing rights to teams, they actually have to apply. So the Cowboys could apply for multiple countries if they wanted to, but so far they only have international marketing rights in Mexico. And so to me, this is evidence of the Cowboys' interest in Mexico specifically. So as a matter of fact, in 2023, Jerry Jones actually talked about this. So let me pull that up real quick. Okay, so this was an article that Jerry Jones did with CBS Sports in 2023. Um, and so he was talking about why he didn't want to host a game internationally and why he preferred to just like stay in the states and actually stay at home in their home stadium as much as possible. So this article says Jerry Jones doesn't want to lose a home game and all the profit that comes with that. And then this is a quote from him. It says, I'm very reluctant to move a home game from here to there, referring to overseas. He says, we have a lot of fans. It fits for a lot of clubs, talking about going international. but it doesn't fit for the Cowboys as much. We got the highest attendance in the NFL, of course. When we don't have a game here, it makes a big difference, you know? And that's also apparently, from something else I was reading, another reason why teams don't invite the Cowboys to play them internationally, because even when the Cowboys go to somebody else's stadium, the revenue increases. So the Cowboys are like, we want to stay at home. And then when other teams have their home games, they're like, no, we want that in our home stadium. So there's just been like no real incentive recently for the Cowboys to be sent overseas by the NFL. And so um, the article goes on, and this is another quote from Jerry Jones when he talks about playing internationally in another country. He said, when we aren't playing here being the US, he said, when we aren't playing here, I want to be in Mexico City, period. Mexico City is good and close. If I'm going international, I want to play in Mexico City, mainly because of our fans and our following and the affinity that we get here back home in the United States. So, in other words, he's acknowledging the proximity in terms of distance, but he's also like, well, yeah, when it comes to us pulling in a big crowd and getting that money, Mexico City is the next best option if we absolutely have to leave the United States. And so now here's something to think about that will probably come up in discussions about this. There are 9 other teams that do also have rights to Mexico via the NFL's Global Markets program. But the last time I checked, which was today, I tried to make sure, based on the information I found, the Cowboys are the only ones who have a deal with Televisa Univision. And so that's, you've probably seen it on your listing as just Univision. But it's a Spanish speaking channel, it's a Mexican channel. So also, the Cowboys are still leading in number and percentage of fans in Mexico, as well as leading in merch sales. So even though there's a bunch of other teams that have marketing rights in Mexico, Cowboys are leading in every category. And they're the only ones who actually have a commercial partnership in Mexico right now. So considering all of this, I don't see Jerry Jones being comfortable with any other team hosting the first NFL game in the newly renovated Estadio Azteca before the Cowboys do. He's got too much pride for that. Plus, with their goal of globalizing the game and using that globalization as a revenue source, which is something Goodell talked about, this is something that the Dallas Cowboys should absolutely want. And this is something that the NFL should also absolutely want. So, considering all that, I would be appalled. I would be shocked and appalled if the Cowboys were not hosting this game in December in Mexico City. Like, I would be floored because everything that's logical and that makes sense and that's reasonable points to Dallas Cowboys hosting. And then the team that actually seems to be second in terms of teams that they like in Mexico and in Mexico City seems to be the Kansas City Chiefs. So now I know picking their opponent would require some finagling. There would be some decisions made regarding that, but the Chiefs have actually exceeded the Cowboys in terms of internet activity, in terms of searching. And a lot of that has to do, of course, with the fact that they've been winning lately. Patrick Mahomes is a very popular player. So if you just look at like internet search history, people are way more interested based on that. They're way more interested in the Chiefs than the Cowboys based on that. But when it comes to where they're actually spending their money, when there's a poll that goes out or a survey and people say who they're fans of, when it comes to who actually has the commercial partnerships, like Mexico is still very much Cowboys country. Now, all that said, I want to connect this to the 18th game because I know I mentioned that in the thumbnail, and I want to talk to y'all about how that connects with the 18th game because this was the part that actually surprised me a little bit. So a while back, I told y'all, I said when it comes to the 18th game being added to the regular season, I said it's a matter of when, not if, because from my perspective, I didn't think that the NFL, there was any scenario where the NFL wouldn't add the 18th game. It was just a matter of like negotiating it, getting into CBA, so on and so forth. And I still think that's highly likely the case. However, I do think based on Roger Goodell's remarks yesterday, that globalization is more of a priority. So when he was asked about the 18th game specifically, what Roger Goodell said was that they hadn't had any formal discussions about it, right? So the NFL and the NFLPA haven't had any formal discussions about it, but he also said it's not a given. So there have been a lot of people, including myself, who have commented on that and been like, it's a given. They just got to figure out the logistics of it, so on and so forth. But he's like, no, it's not a given. And I do believe there's a chance they might put it on the back burner for a little while. And here's why. Um, I think it might be challenging to implement both 16 international games and an 18th game on the schedule. And so the international expansion might be the thing that makes them put that on the back burner, right? So here's the thing that you need to know. Roger Goodell said that it's his goal to have 16 international games in one season, and he wants every single one of the 32 NFL teams to participate in a game, right? But right now, the CBA only allows the NFL to schedule 10 international games. So for the NFL to move to 16, that would also have to be negotiated with the players. So even just from a negotiation standpoint, especially with the NFLPA's emphasis on player health and safety and recovery time, and just work-life balance and emotional well-being, trying to negotiate 16 international games along with an 18th game for each team, that might be a lot to bring to the table at one time. So, when they get to discussing this, the union will most certainly bring up those concerns about player health and safety during the discussion. And so, right now, based on the system that they have, a bye week is required for teams that travel internationally. But those international games may require multiple days of travel. Like, the people going to Australia, that's a lot of fucking travel there and back. So, we're talking multiple days of travel, and the events themselves are becoming more and more taxing because just like Super Bowl week is a whole week of events, there are things like that lined up in these other countries when teams go there. So there's media days and there's media availability that they have to consider. And then sometimes these guys are going to football camps or flag football camps, or they're just otherwise available for community events. So it's like, yeah, they're getting that bye week, but it's like so much is put on them when they travel internationally. You know what I'm saying? Um, and so it's very taxing in terms of demands, so on and so forth. And so there's an argument to be made for allowing teams to have another bye week or mini bye at some point during the season to account for the physical and mental toll of just these high demands of having the international game on top of everything else. Also, these games, according to Goodell, are in such high demand that they're actually having to turn down opportunities. Like sometimes they're having to tell countries no, like that they can't come. And so, like, we know we're smart. We know how supply and demand works, right? So basically, what this is meaning for the NFL is that in addition to broadcasting rights, this allows the NFL to negotiate higher hosting fees and more government support because they're saying, hey, you're asking us to come there. So here's what we need from y'all in order to make this feasible for us. And it leads to more revenue for the league. So if the NFL believes it can make enough money from international games for the time being to increase their revenue the way that they want to increase it, they might pump the brakes on the 18th game for a little bit, especially since they've already got the ball rolling for the international games. They've already got this high demand. And so I don't think the 18th game, if it is put on pause, I don't think it'll be off the table forever. But the league's goal is always to increase revenue. And so if increasing games internationally while holding off on an 18th game makes for smoother negotiations and more desirable terms, then yeah, they might do that. And then there's always the option that they might just adjust the CBA in the same way that they did for the international games. So the league has always had the allowance in the CBA to host 10 international games, but they started off with just a handful, 4 or 5, and then they increased. So similarly, they could put something in the CBA that says like maybe they can revisit the 18th game scenario at a later time, especially if they want to allow more time to, for example, study and evaluate player recovery and the risk of a more demanding schedule, or if they do talk about some of the other things that might be implemented with an 18th game, things like increasing roster size, stuff like that. They might want more time to look at the pros and cons and all that. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But I am at a point where I'm not quite as confident to say that we're going to see that 18th game in the next CBA negotiations. It'll be interesting to see how all this plays out, especially from a cultural standpoint. Like I said, when it came to the what was that penalty that got like way overused this season? Unsportsmanlike conduct, stuff like that. I like the way that it was implemented was to make the game more desirable for an international audience. Because if y'all watch some of these soccer games and some of these other sports, they have a very high bar for sportsmanship. And so when it comes to sports and their influence on culture, via entertainment and via access to like watching these players and them becoming like heroes in the minds of especially kids, some of these countries are going to be like, What are they out there doing? What is this dancer doing? What is this gesture? Did he just make a gun symbol? Like, are they imitating shooting people? Like, what is this? Like, people have a problem with it. So there's a lot of stuff in American culture, especially when it comes to sports, that we're very used to, especially if you've been a football fan for a long time, that just will not fly on international markets for in-person gameplay, and especially with it being that they are setting up broadcast rights agreements when they travel to these other countries. So these games are being televised to the countries that they're in. So yeah, something to think about. But anyway, there's gonna be more coverage from Super Bowl week. So you got the Pro Bowl games tonight. I think they're going on right now. Then you've got the NFL honors on Thursday, and then there's a celebrity flag football game on Saturday. And speaking of the NFL honors, I do like watching that award show. So I want y'all to tell me if y'all would want to do like a watch along for NFL honors where I'm watching it and I just give my commentaries, people give their awards or make jokes or whatever. So tell me in the chat, or if you're watching this after the fact, tell me in the comments if that's something that you're interested in, and I'll see about doing it. I might have to work on Thursday, so I might not be able to either way, but if it's something that y'all really want to do, I might try a little harder to make it happen. So on that note, I do want to talk about the developments with FIFA real quick before we get out of here. So there's a couple of things to talk about. One is that when we first talked about the World Cup, and I told y'all about some of the concerns that human rights activists were having overseas. Actually, hold on. Let me look at y'all's comments real quick. Yes, JV. The NFL would have to literally solve racism. That would be impressive. Albert says, I does begin to understand why the NFL is expanding games to other countries. I get it from my own data, but I get it. Cool. The only nation I'm aware of where Cowboys have fans is in Mexico. I'm not surprised that Dallas has a deal with Televisa, one of the largest TV networks in Mexico. So the Cowboys actually have fans everywhere. For the longest time, they've been like the most popular NFL team globally. That was actually part of the reason why the NFL set up their global markets program the way that they did, is because they wanted to give other teams the opportunity to expand their global reach. And before the implementation of the global markets program, and this was like decades ago, but there were teams who were setting up exhibition games, or when it was allowed, preseason games. They were setting all this up on their own based on their own connections with people in other countries. So for example, that's why it's been a while since something has been hosted in Japan, because Japan had connections with certain people in the NFL. And then with the global markets program being introduced, teams couldn't just set up their own games in Japan because they felt like it. Now it goes through the NFL. So yeah, the Dallas Cowboys, they do have the largest fan base in the world. They do have fans in multiple countries. But when it comes to like that solid base, I think the NFL has an estimated 45 million fans among the whole league in the country of Mexico, and the Dallas Cowboys alone make up for like almost 16 million of those fans. So that's like a little bit over a third of the fans in Mexico are rooting for the Cowboys, and then the rest of the NFL fans in Mexico are spread across the other 31 teams. So that's wild. Albert says, what would be interesting is to find out if Dallas has a large fan base in Europe. I'm curious about that. I can try to find some like actual data on that for you, because I think that would be interesting to discuss, especially with the sport just becoming more global, and just some of these teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars I think they are guaranteed to go to Wembley, maybe not Wembley specifically, but London every year now. So yeah, it's all very interesting. I might look into that for you. JV said, I'm surprised the team nicknamed America's Team has an international fan base at all right now. Well, that's actually how they got the name America's Team. It was because when people around the world thought about American football, they were thinking about the stars of the Cowboys at the time. So they were thinking about Michael Irvin and Troy Aikman. They were thinking about Jimmy Johnson. And so when it came to American football, it's like, oh yeah, the Cowboys, that's the football team from America. And of course, there were other teams, but that was a team they knew around the world. So part of the reason why they have the name America's Team is because of their international presence. And then when I did that interview with my ADHD makes me forget names, but with what's his name from NFL Films, if y'all remember, I asked him about the Kansas City I did not mean to say that. The Kansas City Chiefs. And so part of the reason why the Kansas City Chiefs are calling themselves the world's team is because their international presence and interest in them internationally is growing. And so they wanted their own name. But we also got to remember the Cowboys didn't give themselves a name, America's team. It was given to them and they adopted it. Albert says, no offense to Goodell, but the NFL is not FIFA. It's not a global league yet. He trying though. He trying. Like the NFL is really far away from being like FIFA because they don't have that presence on multiple countries. So like in multiple countries. So like that alone is a big separation. But when it comes to the presence and the money, like they definitely want that. I think spreading the sport will be a little bit more difficult. But I also think that's why they've been so adamant about flag football, because flag football and that being under the umbrella of the NFL is way more easy to grow as a sport than gridiron football. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like that is a big part of the reason why they latched on to flag football, because flag football actually started spreading before the NFL decided to put it under their umbrella. And so I think the NFL was just like, we can either compete with this or we can incorporate it. So it was very much a if you can't beat them, join them type strategy. You know what I'm saying? And so since the NFL already has a global presence, so on and so forth, it was very easy for them to just be like, oh yeah, we're growing the sport of flag football. We're making this happen. But the sport was growing before the NFL got involved. But they've done their part in terms of pumping money into it, pumping branding into it, getting, partnerships, sponsorships, so on and so forth. So they've definitely done right by this sport. But I just want to make it clear that the NFL did not create flag football and they did not start the global expansion of flag football, but they knew they wanted to benefit from it. So that's what they're doing. Albert said he heard that. Oh, you're a Raiders fan, Albert? I did not know that. Good to know. Good to know. I'm gonna have to start paying more attention to the Raiders. Okay. So speaking of FIFA, speaking of globalization, we're gonna go from one leader of an international sports organization to another, because we got to talk about Gianni Infantino and some of the remarks that he made recently. And so, the development that I was about to tell y'all about. I think the first episode where we talked about the World Cup, I told y'all that some of the human rights activists were actually concerned about just basically ICE being in the aspect that we talked about before. Some of the same concerns that people have about the Super Bowl and ICE's presence, they have those same concerns about the FIFA World Cup, and are actually they're kind of more afraid of what might happen at the World Cup, because there's going to be an international presence. That there are going to be people here who are on visas and who might be required to prove that they have a legitimate visa and things of that nature. So one, and I didn't put this in my notes, so I'm just going to go based off what I have from memory, which is not a lot, but there is a type of visa that has been introduced called the FIFA Fast Pass. And so it's a particular type of visa just for people who are coming to America for the FIFA World Cup. And I don't know what all it entails, but I do know that it's supposed to make the process of getting a visa for this event faster. There are probably some different timing stipulations as well. But yeah, sometimes getting a visa can take a while. And so this is a way for people to get that visa. There's also been talk about people, last time I told y'all that people were talking about boycotting the World Cup because of ICE. But another reason people are talking about possibly boycotting the World Cup is because of this potential requirement of basically having your entire social media history investigated in order to be allowed into America. So that's a very different type of precedent. It's, some people are debating, does the First Amendment apply to people who are here visiting? And I think a lot of people just consider it to be very invasive and just very anti-American, at least the version of America that they love, that allows that type of freedom to talk your shit or whatever, as long as you don't actually plan on doing anything illegal. And so there are a lot of people who don't like it. There have been a lot of FIFA fans who are saying hey, if this is a requirement, I'm not coming because fuck that. So that's also a thing. But here's the major development that happened recently. So one of the things that was speculated about was the possibility that Trump might take away protected status from the Haitians who live in the country, and then use the games that the Haiti World Cup team is playing as like a dragnet to try to harass um, Haitian people attending the games in hopes of catching any immigrants who might no longer be protected but did not have the means necessarily to leave, right? So recently, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration. I think my phone might be dying. I might need to go get my charger. But recently, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from stripping temporary protected status from up to 350,000 Haitians, which allows them to legally live and work in the U.S. during turmoil in their homeland. So Haiti will be in the FIFA World Cup for the first time since 1974. So it's only their second time in 52 years. So, yes, fans of the Haitian team, if they have the means, because y'all seen them ticket prices, they will be out. So, right now, the initial games for the Haitian national team are scheduled in Boston, Philadelphia, and Atlanta. So, all in the US. And so there were the concerns by human rights activists that this could turn into an ugly situation. And so this one fear has been addressed directly. But then there were some other things that Infantino discussed. And give me a second. I'm going to pause y'all for a second so I can go get my charger and make sure my phone doesn't die with my notes on it. Hold on. I'm going to be right back. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Rail said, let's hope one day we need to get a president Democrat in the White House. Seriously, even though I'm not into politics, just saying. Since you're not into politics, I'm not going to get into a discussion about Democrats versus Republicans and why I got a problem with all these motherfuckers right now. We just going to keep talking about FIFA. So yeah, Gian Infantino discussed several topics related to the upcoming World Cup. And the one I want to talk to y'all about today is his stance on not banning Russia or Israel from international play. And I know that sounds kind of harsh up front, but like, just give me a second and I'm gonna explain what the fuck is my phone doing. Hold on. It's plugged in but not charging. There we go. I'm like, don't die on me. Um, so Infantino said he wants to lift the ban on Russia because, quote unquote, it hasn't achieved anything. So here's my thing about sporting bans like this, because there are other sports that have implemented these kinds of bans. And so has it brought about peace between Russia and Ukraine, this ban by FIFA? No. But here's what I need y'all to understand. Once again, my educated audience who appreciates having complete information. These types of bans in sports do allow for other exceptions to be made. So, for example, when Elina Svitolina, hold on, I'm gonna start over so I can get a clean take on that. When Elina Svitolina didn't want to shake Aryna Sabalenka's hand after their Australian Open match, that was something that was a decision noted by tournament organizers, and it was communicated to the crowd. So like there was like a a pathway for this to happen. And so basically, Svitolina is Ukrainian and Sabalenka is Belarusian. And so Belarus kind of helped out Russia when it came to their attack on Ukraine, their invasion of Ukraine. And so when it comes to World Tennis Association events, Sabalenka is not allowed to even, use her flag. So it's like if you look up like the brackets and stuff, Sabalenka is competing, but they never announce her country and her flag is never displayed. And fans are not allowed to bring the Belarusian flag into the arena to even support her. You know what I'm saying? And so the fact that the WTA has prohibited things like that allows for players like Svitolina to make those decisions concerning their personal sportsmanship boundaries. And so that's something that might sound small until you consider what happens when an organization doesn't have these kinds of policies in place. So I'm gonna bring y'all an example from the world of cricket, right? And this is something that is like an ongoing situation, but I want y'all to follow me on this, right? So right now, um, there's a situation with the T20 Cricket World Cup where the Pakistan government officially ordered their team to boycott the match against India on February 15th in Sri Lanka, right? So that's this upcoming February. And so the team is still playing the rest of the World Cup. They're just skipping the India game as a selective protest. Now, here's how this happened. I need y'all to follow me on this, right? Here's how this happened. So, Bangladesh was kicked out of the tournament last week, and they got replaced by Scotland. And so, the reason for this was that the Bangladesh Cricket Board refused to play their matches in India because of concerns after a political fallout. Um, and so, Pakistan, who is neither Bangladesh nor India, is boycotting India to protest the ICC's quote unquote double standards. And so they're basically saying, if you're not going to protect Bangladesh's interests, we're going to hit you where it hurts, because the India versus Pakistan game is one of the games that brings in the most revenue. And so to understand all of that, let me actually rewind this a little bit for you. So that game, like I said, it's the most lucrative game. Some people say it's the most lucrative game in global sports. I don't know about that. I wasn't able to fact check on that, but it's a very lucrative game. And so broadcasters are and sponsors are looking at a potential loss of $300 million. And they're looking at total possible losses of potentially $500 million. Plus, the ICC might actually freeze Pakistan's annual revenue and potentially block international stars from playing in the Pakistan Super League as punishment. So we're talking loss on top of loss on all fronts because of this decision. So let me go back to where this started, right? So I'm working backwards here. This is how this whole situation came about. So there's this team called the Kolkata Knight Riders. It's one of the biggest teams in the Indian Premier League, and they're co-owned by Bollywood legend Shah Rukh Khan. And so here's how that team became involved in this global crisis. So in the IPL auction that's held in December, there was a huge ass bidding war for a player named Mustafizur Rahman, right? And I hope I'm saying that at least partially correct. But basically, the Knight Riders won him for $1.1 million, making him the most expensive Bangladeshi player in the history of the league. So I just talked to y'all about issues between Bangladesh and India. Here we have a Bangladeshi player that became the most expensive Bangladeshi player for an Indian team, right? So in the history of the league, he's the most expensive Bangladeshi player. And so this was a sports-based move. They needed, according to reports that I'm reading, they needed a world-class left-arm fast bowler. I don't know what the fuck that is, but that's what they needed. That's why they got this dude, okay? So we just talking sports. No politics involved, just sports. Dude is making the best decisions for his team, right? So fast forward to January, when the signing happened, political tensions between India and Bangladesh spiked. So there were activists and there were political leaders in India who actually started publicly attacking the team. And so they targeted the owner of the team, Shah Rukh Khan. They called him a traitor for signing this contract to a player from Bangladesh, because this happened while there's ongoing violence against minorities in Bangladesh. So basically, there's tension between India and Bangladesh because of political reasons, because of religious reasons. And then this Indian dude goes and signs this Bangladeshi player, pays him tons of money. And so now you got Indian politicians like, what the fuck are you doing? What do you think you're doing? Like, this is not the move right now. I don't care what you need for your team. So on January 2nd, the BCCI, which is the Indian governing board for the sport, officially stepped in and they told the Knight Riders they had to release this guy. They said, you got to get him off the team. And so it wasn't because of his sports performance. It wasn't because of an injury. It was to avoid the controversy and the protests that were happening at the time, right? So now we're looking at this domino effect. So because of that decision, because of political tensions and protests, you've got this guy, Mustafizur, who lost $1 million payday. You've got Bangladesh, who said they felt disrespected because their star player was treated like a security threat. He wasn't the security threat. It was people who were like having conflict with one another, and they used him being on that team as a point of tension. Like, there's no record of this player actually doing anything wrong. There's no record of the team or its owner doing anything wrong. But because there are people who are having this political conflict, it caused issue for this team and this player. And so then Bangladesh told the ICC, like, okay, y'all, because of this issue with India, right? So Bangladesh is basically mad at India because India said, hey, you can't have this Bangladeshi player on your team. And so Bangladesh said, if our top player isn't safe enough to play in a club league in Kolkata, our whole national team isn't safe to play in the World Cup in India. So they're like, oh, you don't want our best player to play on the team and get his money in India? Well, then we won't go to India at all. If y'all think we such a threat, ain't none of us going. And so then when so Bangladesh was like, we're not going. So the ICC was like, all right. And they replaced them with Scotland, right? And so Pakistan was like, oh, but last year when India didn't want to come to Pakistan, you moved the games to accommodate India. But now Bangladesh saying they don't want to go to India and you replace them, that's messed up. So that's how Pakistan got involved, even though they weren't initially involved. They had nothing to do with this drama between India and Bangladesh. Pakistan has its own issues with India. Um, but it was this double standard that said, and they were like, okay, so we're going to boycott in solidarity. This situation did not involve us, but we feel a way about it. And they might have a reason to, because I think it's later in my notes. But when India made their decision to not go to Pakistan, not once but multiple times, it has cost India, it has cost Pakistan revenue, right? And Pakistan just kind of dealt with it because they're just like, all right, well, this is the ruling from the board, so we'll accommodate. And now they're like, well, why do those rules apply to India, but like Bangladesh doesn't get the same consideration? So look, I'm gonna just say this when it comes to cricket. I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck a power play is and legs before wickets or whatever is going on with the rules. I don't know enough about the sport, but I do know what $500 million is. And right now, that is what they're looking at losing because of a political conflict. And so, just to give y'all some more specific numbers, they're looking at potentially losing up to $35 million because of broadcaster ad losses, um, losing up to $35.5 million because of the national board risk. And then, hold on, I've got my notes in three different places again. My bad, y'all. No, not the screenshot. I need, actually, never mind. So yeah, just know that they might lose up to $500 million. Okay, here it is. Here it is. I found it. So okay, they're actually they actually might lose $500 because of broadcasting alone. So there were like record breaking ads for this specific match, and so they might lose all of that. And so, and then there's the issue with the ICC and the member boards, where apparently there's a risk to media rights and sponsorship deals. And so, this is revenue that's actually supposed to go to all the member nations involved in this World Cup, and they might lose that as well. And then there's the $38 to $75 million that Pakistan might lose. And so they're at risk of losing that. Plus, there might be the 35 million might come from the revenue that like their revenue share that they might lose because of the boycott. But they also might have to deal with legal action from the broadcasters who were planning on putting this game on. And then India might lose ICC distributions and match day commercial activity, so 24 million. And then there's also the local economy in Sri Lanka and what they might lose from tickets and just tourists and people being active on the day of that game, right? So we're looking at, once again, $500 million plus in losses because of this situation, which if you were to scale that up based on what it would look like if this happened with FIFA, we're talking about, closer to $2 or $3 billion. You know what I'm saying? And so this is why I didn't really like Infantino's comments, because the argument that he was making was that football should be like a neutral bridge. But what this cricket situation shows us is that like you can't have neutrality without some kind of protocol in place. You can't just be like, I want to lift the bans on these countries and not discuss it and just expect everything to be okay. Like, you're basically asking for chaos in that situation. And that's essentially what happened here. Um, and so it's it basically shows that you have to have a system for handling geopolitical friction. And so I would actually argue that if Infantino does want to lift the bans, he actually needs to consider replacing it with some sort of, I don't know, mitigation protocol, like just some sort of standard protocol. Because in this case, it wasn't just the conflict that caused issues, it was the cost of the inconsistency. You know what I'm saying? Because when India had an issue going to Pakistan and the games had to be moved to India, there weren't boycotts over that. People just kind of dealt with it. There was annoyance over it, but people dealt with it. It wasn't until they didn't apply the same rules to Bangladesh that it became a problem, right? And so it was the double standard, it was the inconsistency. And so when you consider that as a cost of not having like a clear plan that's fair for everybody, like you could be inviting a similar situation into FIFA if you don't come up with a clear plan. And so the bans aren't necessarily about saying, oh, if we have a ban on Russia, they'll pull out of Ukraine. Like nobody expects Russia to pull out of Ukraine because of anything involving the World Cup. That's not a thing. But what having a ban in place it does is it causes advanced discussion. It means that FIFA as a governing body has to come together and look at the logistics. And so simply saying like we shouldn't ban anyone, it's kind of irresponsible. You can't just like close your eyes and hope that politics don't show up, that they don't come into play. Like you have to have a discussion about it. You have to have protocols for it because it could come into play at any time. Because, like I explained, all this started with sports people making sports decisions, and then shit just blew up from there. You know what I'm saying? And so, essentially, when Gianni Infantino said, bans on Russia and Israel achieve nothing, I'm like, I get it. I get just wanting the players to play, but like, if you look at what's happening in with the Cricket World Cup, now we have like one of the biggest matches in that World Cup, and it's not going to happen. And that's a direct result of the failure of the governing body. So, what you don't really want is you don't want to last minute have a situation where political egos come into play, and all of a sudden you don't have a plan for it. You don't have a way around it. You don't have a way of resolving that, which usually takes time. It takes discussions. It takes having a protocol in place, just some kind of standard for how those things are supposed to be handled in order to not make the whole situation a lot worse. So, um, yeah, there's probably a lot more to eventually be discussed from that conversation, but we'll cut that FIFA conversation there for right now. Um, Rose said, "It's all good, Jazz. I love your channel. Just trying to give good advice." No, I feel you, and I actually do appreciate the advice, even though I don't really like either political party. But like, I do think sometimes you have to consider like less of two evils, or what is actually best for the greater good. You know what I'm saying? And so like, um, when it comes to people promoting the idea of a Democrat in office, I think it's for some people it is about like they really do like the Democrats policies, but I think for some people it really is like that realization that like, look, we can't continue the status quo. Like, we can work on finding the perfect candidate. None of these candidates are perfect, but there are several that are better in our minds than what we're seeing now, and sometimes it comes to that. So yeah, I do agree that that's actually good advice, and I would encourage a lot of people to think about that, because I think one of the reasons why progressives and Democrats get tripped up so much is because if you look at the rhetoric, it seems like progressives and Democrats, they always want the perfect candidate. Like, one wrong statement, one wrong stance can make people be like, I'm not voting for this person at all. And so then the other side wins because their side is actually showing up to the polls, and they're very forgiving of mistakes and flaws and making the wrong statement. Whereas progressives and Democrats tend to be like, oh, this person, I don't agree with them on this one thing, so fuck them and everything that they stand for. I'm not voting for them. And it's just like, it's not like there's a certain number of Democrats that have to show up to the polls. It's like, if you don't show up, you are helping other people win, which like is like, once again, is your prerogative. But I'm just saying, don't wait for the perfect candidate. That cannot be the thing. So, um, JV said, lesser of two evils is still evil. Technically, yes, but there's what I like to refer to as a trajectory, right? So I'm gonna try to keep this political conversation short, but here's my perspective on it. When we think about a lot of the things that we're seeing in the news right now that we don't like when it comes to violation of rights, like last time I talked to y'all about all the constitutional rights that have been violated that nobody is being held accountable for, right? That's a big deal to me. Like that should be a big deal to American citizens who look at America and love America because of the constitutions and the freedoms that are allowed. Like I don't know how anybody could argue against that, you know? But that didn't happen overnight. That didn't happen by people just one day waking up and being like, fuck the Constitution. That happened by the conservatives being strategic over years, over several election cycles. You know what I'm saying? To eventually get the right people in place to actually support a lot of the initiatives that are going on right now, you know? And so when it comes to the lesser of two evils, it's like, yeah, you can look at the lesser of two evils is still evil, especially in the sense of like how campaigns are being funded or what we can actually expect to change in one term or what people's actual true interests are when it comes to running for office. You know what I'm saying? But it's like I also look at it as like the same way that conservatives had to put in place various measures election cycle after election cycle, progressives and Democrats might have to do the same thing. So lesser of two evils might still be evil, but it's a step in the right direction. And so we can take that step and then add a step on top of that, and a step on top of that, and a step on top of that, to where we get to a point where hopefully we regain a lot of the freedoms that we've lost over the past couple of decades, or to where, you know, the America that we're looking at on the news looks a lot closer to the idea of America as a land of the free that a lot of people have in their mind, that a lot of people grew up with. You know what I'm saying? And so it's not that I'm looking for an option that's not evil. I'm looking at which path is going to take us in a direction that I'm comfortable with, which path looks to be the best path. And so it's like if we think about like evil as being down here and good being up here, it's like, yeah, all candidates might be like down here. But it's just like there's some that are like down here and they comfortable here, or they trying to go down here. You know what I'm saying? They're like authoritarianism, dictatorship. Yes, give us more of that shit. Whereas there are some candidates who are like here, they're still under the evil bar, but they're like, look, I can take us from here to here. And then we're gonna have to get somebody else to take us here. And then somebody else gonna have to carry the torch here, and maybe we'll eventually get to good. You feel me? So steps in the right direction. Um, okay, so before I get out of here, I want to do a quick as it is in sports, so it is in life. I was hoping Clement would be here because I'm about to talk about his Arsenal Gunners. Now, um, today's as it is in sports, so it is in life is dedicated to the Arsenal Gunners who had an awesome match against Chelsea today. But I'm going to talk about something that's actually been a discussion for the past couple of weeks. And so the lesson for today, I'm going to get to how it connects to Arsenal in a second, but the lesson for today is don't let haters talk you out of leaning into your strengths. Do not let haters talk you out of leaning into your strengths. So when it comes to Arsenal and the Premier League, when you listen to podcasters and pundits talk about Arsenal, especially the critics, the people who don't like Arsenal right now, there's a lot of talk about proper football. And my thing is this. Clearly, proper football is not necessarily the winning strategy. But here's why it comes up so much. So I'm gonna fill y'all in on some stuff when it comes to Arsenal, just so you kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about. So what's happening with the Arsenal team right now is that they are being criticized for having a high number of set pieces. So what are set pieces? Set pieces are basically where, hold on, I thought I put it in my notes, but maybe I didn't. I just wanted to explain this clearly for you guys. Okay, going off the top of my head. So set pieces are basically where there's a dead ball situation. So maybe the ball is out of play for some reason, or there's some kind of foul occurred and the ball has to be put back into play. And so when it comes to getting the ball back into play, that can result in a throw in, or there can be a corner kick or a free kick or a penalty kick, right? And so Arsenal, who's at the top of the Premier League right now, has actually scored a lot of points and won a lot of games because of their strategy surrounding set pieces. Okay. And so this is actually something that I talked about on Friday, where we talked about set pieces and how they kind of have some similarities with the tush push in the sense that in the sense that one, it's something that's not illegal in the game for them to do, just people don't like it because once again it's quote unquote not proper football. Two, you've got people that are trying to make rules against it, so basically people are so bothered by Arsenal's success with set pieces that they're actually trying to make rules to change how a team can get set pieces, or to at least impact the reliance on set pieces, which I don't think is actual reliance, but they're using it to their advantage, right? And then the third way that it aligns with the tush push is the fact that I don't think it would be a big deal if Arsenal weren't winning. I really don't. Um, and so when it comes to, as it is in sports, so it is in life, the first thing that I want y'all to remember when it comes to Arsenal and this situation where they're being criticized because of their set pieces is one, as much as people talk about proper football, quote unquote, clearly proper football isn't a guaranteed winning strategy, right? So why are people making such a big deal about it? Why is it such a big deal? And that's where you get into feelings versus facts on the matter, you know? So when it comes to us in our personal lives, you might have a special skill, special talent, some characteristic that sets you apart from other people and that allows you to have an edge in a certain situation, whether it's professionally, socially, romantically, and you'll have people speak out against that, right? So you might be the person at work who maybe didn't get the high level degree that other people in your department did, but maybe you're a fast learner. Maybe you're a charismatic person and it helps you get clients. Maybe I feel like this happens to women a lot, where women get criticized for like wearing makeup or, having work done on their bodies, so on and so forth. There's so many things that we could list when it comes to people's personal lives and how people are criticized for leaning into something that other people think just isn't fair. Like there's nothing illegal about it, but they just feel like it isn't fair and therefore you should stop doing it. Another sports example that I think of when it comes to this is when there was a time, and this was about 10 years ago, when Serena Williams, there were a lot of complaints about her being too loud on the court, right? Um, and so people swore that she was unnecessarily loud, that she was inappropriate, that she was distracting. And so they did a decibel test, right? They actually measured her loudness. And so what they found was she was in the top five. She was in the top five of loudest tennis players, but she wasn't the loudest. At the time, Maria Sharapova was actually 10 to 12 decibels louder than her on average, but she wasn't, for some reason, getting the same complaints, right? And so, what this shows you that you can apply to your own life is that folks will literally just start throwing dirt on your name with shit that's not only false, it might not even make sense. You know what I'm saying? And so, like in the case of Arsenal, like what sense does it make to criticize a team for doing something that's within the rules that other teams can take advantage of? Because here's the thing about the set pieces, right? That's a really good comparison with the Serena Williams situation. When it comes to corner kicks, Arsenal doesn't get the most. So as of today, total corners for this season, Arsenal has had 148, Newcastle United has had 159, and Chelsea has had 141. So they're all within that range, and Newcastle United just has more. But what's the difference? When it comes to the conversion rate, so actually getting points off those corner goals, Arsenal actually has a conversion rate of 11.5%, compared to 7.5% for Newcastle and 7.8% for Chelsea. So it's not even like they're being favored by the officials in some way, shape, or form. It's that they're literally getting comparable opportunities to other teams, but they're just better at it. They're literally being criticized for being better at something. That shit is wild. But it's something that, as people, once again, you might face in your own life. And so, one of the things that you have to remember in this situation is that sometimes it's not that you're actually doing anything wrong. Sometimes haters will just feel away. Sometimes people will be butthurt for no reason. And sometimes that's all it is. And you've got to dismiss it for exactly that. The second thing I want y'all to take from this is to focus on the goal. Always focus on whatever your goal is. So I was watching the match against Chelsea today, and afterwards there was an interview with Declan Rice. He's one of the star players for Arsenal, and all he talked about was one game at a time and a focus on winning, which is really dope. But what you didn't hear was him clapping back at anybody in the media who had been talking about them. As a matter of fact, I think there was another quote from another Arsenal player that I saw recently, where they were talking about winning as well. Let me see if I can find it real quick, because this is from a few days ago, obviously before today's match against Chelsea. So yeah, there was a quote from William Saliba. And so what he said was, yeah, we know it's been a while before we got to the final in the Carabao Cup. So that was the tournament that they were playing today. So it's a massive game for us, especially at home, and it's a big derby, Chelsea. So we have to win, and everyone wants to win and everything on Tuesday to go into the final. It would give us a lot of confidence, because I think if we go in the final of the Carabao Cup, it would be the first final of everything. So basically, there's multiple finals that they could potentially win. The Carabao Cup is one of them, and they are going to the finals for the first time in 6 years. Shout out to them. But he goes on to say, so we have to go there, and the game isn't won. We have to prove it that we want to win everything. So he's just bringing up winning over and over again in his quote. Declan Rice today bringing up winning, and so what they're not focused on is what people are saying about them, how people feel about their set pieces, what people think they should be doing in terms of their strategy. They're focused on winning. And what they're doing is actually getting them wins. That's why they're at the top of the Premier League. I think it would be different if they were focused on set pieces and somehow this was like costing them their position. But no, they've been at the top of the league damn near the entire season, maybe the entire season. I just haven't been watching the entire season, but damn near the entire season, they've been at the top. So what this says is you have to focus on your goal no matter what. There are going to be folks literally rooting on your downfall just to prove themselves right, literally waiting for you to fail, hoping that you lose just so they can be like, see, told you it was a bad choice to focus on those set pieces, told you can't win a championship like that, told you can't win a championship not playing proper football. Arsenal has been called a boring team. People have said that they might be the worst champions ever. People saying they play bad football. But if they win, guess what? You can call them whatever. What they care about is winning. So as long as you call them winners, they don't give a fuck. You want to call them boring? All right, we some boring ass champions then, right? We about to have a boring ass celebration with this boring ass trophy. Fuck you. Like, I mean, that's the attitude I feel like I would have if people were constantly asking me about something that I worked on in order to get these wins, right? Because it's not like I said, it's not like they're getting favor from the officials. It's not like other teams don't have these opportunities. It's not like they're doing anything illegal. And it's not like they're doing anything that other teams can't prepare for. They just haven't figured out how. And that should really be the big question. Instead of people wondering, like, why does Arsenal keep getting so many set pieces? Why are we this far into a season and nobody can figure out how to beat them? Well, I mean, they haven't won every game, but you know what I'm saying? Like, nobody's taking their spot. Nobody has figured out how to take proper football and make it a legitimate answer consistently to what Arsenal is bringing to the table. You know what I'm saying? And then here's the other side of it. Here's what they don't talk about. Yes, Arsenal has got more points off set pieces than any other team. You know what else they got? They got more clean sheets than any other team. I learned that today. And the thing is, so for y'all who don't know, clean sheets is when you stop the other team from scoring at all. So it's not like all they bring to the table is set pieces. They also apparently bring to the table a bomb-ass defense, possibly the best defense in the league. But everybody's so busy looking at the set pieces, they're not looking at the fact that, or at least they're not discussing the fact that this team has an incredible defense and that they actually do break out the offense when they need it, which is something else that you can compare to your own life. So as it is in sports, as it is in life, as it is in sports, so it is in life. People might focus on the thing that they don't like, even though you bring so much more to the table. It's so easy to talk about what you don't like and so easy to criticize what you think might be a person's downfall. But they're actually more than their set pieces. They simply are. But people don't want to talk about that because then they'd have to address a nuance. They might have to address that they sound like haters by just talking about the set pieces and not also acknowledging that, like, hey, there's more to this whole strategy than just the set pieces. There's more to these wins. There's more to being number one in the league than just these fucking set pieces that y'all are so mad about. And so that brings us to point number 3, though, and that is adjust when necessary. Like, yes, be proud of what you bring to the table, but don't be so proud that you won't adjust. Because there are some Arsenal fans who are saying out of love, not out of criticism, not out of being a hater, they're saying out of love that, hey, We're concerned about what happens if somebody does figure out how to counter this and Arsenal doesn't have the offense necessary to stay at the top. And that's one of the things that you're just going to have to cross that bridge when you get to it, because to this point, Arsenal has shown that they can score open play goals. They've shown that. They did it today against Chelsea. They did it during their last game over the weekend. I can't remember for the life of me who they played. That's my bad. But they've shown that they can do it. They just haven't had to do it a ton. And so it's not like they don't have it in their toolbox. It just depends on how much they end up needing to use it. And some fans are concerned that they might not have enough of that particular tool in their toolbox. And that's valid, right? When you're bringing something special to the table, you might surprise yourself with the impact that it has on your industry or in your job or in your social circle, right? So by all means, evaluate the risk, consider improvements. We should always be working on self-improvement. Add what you need to your toolbox, but that doesn't mean you should completely abandon your strengths. So like you can switch it up if reaching your goal requires it. Like I said, we've got these players for Arsenal. All they talk about is winning. They don't care who thinks they're boring. They're like, they want to win. And so I have no doubt that if it turns out that this was no longer helping them win, they would figure out how to change their strategy. So if your situation requires it, adjust your strategy by all means. Keep working on your craft so you're prepared to adjust if you ever need to. But that's if you need to, if your goal requires it. Because once again, going back to point number 2, you got to always focus on the goal. So if it's for the goal, adjust. But if it's because of like intimidation from the outside noise or criticism for the pundits, or if it's because of haters or butthurt motherfuckers, and especially if it's because you're ops, don't change shit. Okay? So that's your as it is in sports, so it is in life for the day. Just focus on yourself, focus on what you bring to the table. Be proud of that, especially if you're winning. Because if you're winning, they just gonna talk louder and louder. It's not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. If anything, it's probably a sign that you're doing something right. Because if you weren't, they wouldn't want to talk about you at all. So that's the episode for the day. I know that was a lot of information. This is one of the longest streams I've done in a while. So that was a lot of information. If you're watching this after the fact, feel free to put your comments, questions, feedback in the comments. And if you have anything to put in the chat, I'll give you like 2 minutes to add whatever you want to add to the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to get out of here and move on with my night. It is almost 8:30. That is crazy. It's been a long ass day, y'all. It's been a long ass day. Oh, reminder. Let me know if y'all want to do the NFL Honors Watch Along on Thursday. Otherwise, I'll probably see y'all on Friday. And there will be replays this week. So if y'all open up the YouTube app and y'all see like a live badge on my name, just know it might be a replay, but once you click on it, you should see if it's a replay or not. Anyway, it looks like y'all don't have anything, but thanks for joining me in the chat tonight. This has been another episode of Bitches Love Sports. I'm your host, Jazz Monet, and I'm out.
You only think of us as a bitches when you intimidated. Put it that way. I think
people look at a woman and she's an aggressive woman who's out to get what she wants to get. You know what I'm saying? Ambitious, and they want to say, you know, when a male is assertive, this is what he wants. He's looked at as a strong male, but yet when I get it, you know, I'm a bitch.
Exactly.
And if that's what I gotta be, exactly, to get what I want and to make it somewhere, then I'll just be that.